A global threat is facing all of humanity. Luckily, America is taking the lead in fighting this pandemic.
The US government has announced a $15 million reward for information leading to the arrest of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro.
A global threat of socialism? That can't be right.
Our pressure campaign remains designed to induce Iran to act like a normal country. I urged our G7 partners to go further in joining us.
The pandemic of Iran refusing to prostrate itself to US hegemony? What the hell? The UN Secretary General has called for an immediate global ceasefire to help fight the actual global threat we all face. That is COVID-19, or coronavirus.
The fury of the virus illustrates the folly of war. That is why today I am calling for an immediate global ceasefire in all corners of the world. It is time to put armed conflict on lockdown and focus together on the true fight of our lives.
But none of this matters to the other pandemic threatening the world, U.S. imperialism. At a time when all of humanity is threatened and governments around the world are showing solidarity, the American regime change apparatus is taking advantage of the virus to weaken its enemies, even as the American government is failing to address the urgent needs at home. While doctors and nurses wear trash bags and reuse face masks, the U.S. government is choosing this moment to place a hefty bounty on Maduro's head for narco-trafficking, which is a bullshit accusation in the first place. It's the governments of U.S. allies like Honduras that are run by narco-traffickers. On top of that, the U.S. is maintaining sanctions on Venezuela that cripple its ability to contain the coronavirus or treat its victims. Long before coronavirus was even a thing, U.S. sanctions had already killed an estimated 40,000 people in a single year, mostly by blocking access to life-saving medications that treat illnesses such as HIV. And while France, Germany, Britain, and China send medical supplies to hard-hit Iran, the sociopaths in America are coming out in favor of mass death, with Bloomberg's resident neocon Eli Lake, who took a break from what I can only imagine is kicking hospice patients in the face for fun, to state that coronavirus is not the time to lift murderous sanctions on Iran. Fortunately, Bernie Sanders joined a handful of other progressive lawmakers who aren't evil in demanding we lift sanctions on Iran so they can fight the virus. But other Democrats, like the guy the party is pushing as their nominee, don't agree.
Would you lift sanctions on Iran temporarily during this pandemic?
I don't have enough information about the situation in Iran right now.
Enough information? Have you read the news out of Iran? Tens of thousands are infected and thousands have died, and they don't have the medical supplies to treat people because of U.S. sanctions. Even the world's best healthcare systems can't cope. Sanctioning impoverished countries right now is murder. Mike Pompeo knows that, but where a human might see a horrifying recipe for mass death and seek to help, Pompeo sees an opportunity to punish Iran by maximizing the casualties. On top of choking Iran with a smile on his face, in the middle of a pandemic, he's pushing the Trump administration to go to war against Iraqi paramilitary forces that help defeat ISIS, like Kataib Hezbollah. According to the New York Times, Pompeo and National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien sees coronavirus not as a danger, but as an opportunity to try to destroy Iranian-backed militia groups in Iraq as leaders in Iran are distracted by the pandemic crisis in their country. So far, cooler military heads have prevailed, not because they're humanitarian, but because they don't want to start a war now. But what the fuck is wrong with Mike Pompeo? Why is he like this? Did Iran take away his cupcakes? Even Iraq's largest Shia paramilitary force, Soraya al-Salam, stated their solidarity with the international efforts to halt conflicts and help the World Health Organization fight coronavirus, while condemning what it calls U.S. attempts to drag Iraq into war. The U.S. has the highest number of confirmed coronavirus cases in the world. USA! 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 But that hasn't stopped our government from threatening China with live-fire missile tests, while the propaganda apparatus blames China for the virus to deflect from their own ineptitude in stopping the spread. Hey, there's no better time than a pandemic to escalate Cold War 2.0. Yeah. After all, it's obviously the Chinese Communist Party's fault we failed at testing and preparing our hospitals. Meanwhile, there will be no sanctions released for Syria or Cuba either. That hasn't stopped Cuba from sending doctors to help other countries, which probably makes little Mikey Pompeo mad. God damn it! Back in November 2019, Pompeo applauded the coup leaders of Bolivia for expelling Cuban doctors, as Brazil and Ecuador had done.
The Bolivian government announced Friday the expulsion of hundreds of Cuban officials for their country. It was the right thing to do. Cuba wasn't sending doctors and officials to Bolivia to help the Bolivian people. Bolivia now joins Brazil and Ecuador in recognizing the Cuban threat to freedom. Bravo, Bolivia.
Now that those doctors are desperately needed, countries like Brazil are begging them to come back. Meanwhile, Cuba has sent its famous doctor brigades to help fight the virus in more than 14 countries, including Italy. The U.S. response? The State Department has warned countries to not accept the help. Yeah, don't accept help from Cuban doctors. Be like us and privatize healthcare so no one can afford treatment. Let the virus spread. Don't give healthcare workers protective equipment so your system collapses, and keep on bombing the rest of the world while you crumble internally. Americans are going to die by the hundreds of thousands thanks to a government that prioritizes money over people. While China, Cuba, and other countries are trying to help those afflicted, the U.S. seeks escalation. Yet even the tools of this empire are not immune to the virus.
At least 23 sailors now testing positive on the aircraft carrier, the USS Theodore Roosevelt. Now all 5,000 sailors will be tested.
Not a virus, not an economic collapse, nothing will stop U.S. empire from wreaking havoc on the world.